Hey guys, welcome back to another video tutorial by Fan. Today I'm going to be showing you guys how to jungle Prophet, and more importantly than focusing on the basic mechanics of how you jungle Prophet, I'm going to be focusing on the things you need to do and the things that are really important in order for you to be successful at utilizing Prophet. I see a lot of solo queue players playing Prophet, but they play the hero kind of in a bad way. They don't really utilize it to its full potential. And there's two or three main points that I want to cover that are very, very important when you're playing a hero such as Jungle Prophet. And these 3 points are absolutely critical for success, especially as you get higher and higher in MMR. So I'm going to be focusing on primarily on how you can play the hero really well and the things you can do in order to help you play the hero really well. Okay, so first things first, I'm going to talk about what you should be doing before the game starts. So at 50 seconds before the game starts, I like to summon my first pair of Treants and send them to the rune spots, as you see. And the reason you want to do that is because obviously you need vision of the runes, and if for some reason your teammates aren't standing by the rune that spawns, you can easily deny it. So it's a very big advantage, and if you aren't doing this already, definitely get into the habit of doing it. Now, I'm just going to talk about the starting build real fast, I guess. As you can see, my starting build is going to be Ring of Bassi and 2 Clarities. That's my default starting build. I really like it. It gets you to your Midas without any other additional buys required. And the Ring of Bassi is also really useful for when you're, pushing towers later on, or ratting a tower, or anything of that sort. Okay. So the second thing I like to do is, somewhere between 0 seconds and 5 seconds, I do like to summon my Treants. And as soon as you summon your second pair of Treants, start moving towards the small camp. As you can see, I'm moving towards the small camp right now. And if you time this properly, you're going to get to the small camp right around 30 seconds, which is when it spawns. So it's timed out very well here. And here you see me looking top, and this is actually what I'm going to be talking about. This is going to be my first point. My first very crucial tip for playing Furion that I don't see very many people do at all. So what I want to talk about right now is camera control as Jungle Prophet. And most of the time, when I go back into a game and look at various Jungle Prophets, I see that for the vast majority of the game, they have their camera centered on their hero. And this is something that's very common, and this is pretty much what you do for every other hero. You keep your camera centered on your hero. However, if you want to play an effective Jungle Prophet, keeping the camera centered on your hero is actually a very bad thing. It's not where you want your camera to be. When you're playing Jungle Prophet, it's really, really easy to jungle. Basically, you click the creeps, and your Treants and hero are going to do the job for you. So there's very little need to look at your hero. I know, sometimes I micro back a weak Treant or something, and that's fine, but for the vast majority of the time, you shouldn't be looking at your hero. Rather, you should be looking at the 3 lanes, and you should constantly be scrolling your camera between the 3 lanes, between the runes, checking out when the chicken's gonna deliver the bottle to mid, which, by the way, is gonna be generally around 2 to 3 minutes, maybe a little earlier if the other mid player is rushing the bottle. So I'm gonna start this replay again, and what I want you guys to really focus on is where my camera is going. So here we go. So I've already looked top once, right before I paused this replay. And here, I'm looking at top again, second time, and back to myself. And yeah, microing the Treants a little bit, trying to kill it, look at top again, swing to mid, and, pull the camera back to myself. And I didn't make it in time to respawn that small camp, unfortunately, so I moved to the next one. And immediately after I click the second camp, I look bottom, and then I look mid again, and back to myself. And now I'm looking top. So this is just a typical pub game that I played with some of my friends the other week. And as you can see, my camera movement, I've pretty much already looked at top 4 times. I've looked at mid twice, and I've looked at bottom once. And it's 1 minute and 20 seconds into the game. So obviously I'm moving my camera around a lot, and this is exactly what you want to be doing when you're playing Jungle Prophet, because as I said, there's really nothing to be looking at as far as your hero itself is concerned. There's nothing happening here. It's just treants killing the jungle. What you really need to be focusing on is each of the individual lanes, so you can get a really good sense of what's going on in the game. And I looked at top 4 times because every time I looked at top, they were fighting. So I thought that was the lane that was most likely going to be needing my help. So depending on what circumstances you see in each of the lanes, you can adjust how often you look at them. But overall, definitely keep your camera on the lanes instead of your hero. And this is something that most people don't do. I know obviously everyone will look at a lane eventually as Nature's Prophet, but for the vast majority of my games, when I play with a Nature's Prophet in the jungle, pretty much someone gets ganked, or a room spawns, or the chicken delivers the bottle to the mid player, and they don't do anything. And that's just because their camera is just like this. They're not looking at the map. So when you're not looking at the map and you're just looking at yourself, you're not going to have the reaction time required to make the teleports happen, because you're not going to be able to, teleport in time. So that's my first tip. It's something that I think is absolutely critical in terms of playing Nature's Prophet, and it's something that almost no one under 5K does. So definitely keep this in mind. And if you're someone who keeps your camera on yourself most of the time, and I think most Dota players are someone do that. So if you're someone who does that when you're playing Nature's Prophet, try and adjust your camera control, and always try and keep it on the lanes. Obviously, there's going to be exceptions. If they're running like an aggressive tri-lane on the top lane, and you notice that both of their supports are missing, then the supports are either going to be ganking mid, or they're going to be ganking you in the jungle. So in that situation, you want to be looking at yourself a lot to avoid the gank. But definitely use your best judgment, and in most situations, don't look at yourself that much. Okay, so moving on to my second point. My second point is about the skill Teleportation. Now, this is by far the best skill that Prophet has, and whenever he's picked in a competitive game, it's for this skill. It's for the global teleport. And this is something that you really need to abuse. I've already talked about the camera positioning, and that's going to help you in ganking heroes and assisting heroes in lanes. Anytime you see a lane that needs help, you can instantly teleport because you're already looking at them all the time. But you can also use teleport to really, rat and, just play objective control. Now, I'm going to fast forward to the next point in this replay, where I'm going to show you a basic example of what I'm talking about. So here you can see I'm kind of just chilling bottom in the enemy's jungle. I'm going to be farming it out a little bit, and I'm going to play the replay here, see what happens. So I'm jungling here, and all of a sudden I notice that shit's going down top. People are fighting, and I see the Void here. He's trying to kill Tide, and all of a sudden I see 4 heroes. So at this point in time, one of their heroes is dead, and the other 4 are all top ganking Tide. And when this situation happens, I'm already looking here because it's been going on for a while, and you need to make a snap decision. When you see this, you need to either think about TPing into the fight to see if you can turn it around, or you need to think about getting something back, trading an objective. So here I see that Tide's about to die. He's probably almost dead, and even if he doesn't die, his Ravage is down because he just used it earlier. And we only have 2 people near top. So there's really no way I can TP in and turn this fight. So the only thing I can do is, either keep farming or trade an objective. Now, whenever this happens to you, whenever you see 3, 4, or 5 heroes ganking one of your heroes or grouping up to push an objective, you need to make this snap decision. And what you need to be asking yourself is, do I TP into the fight? And if not, are there any easy objectives on the other team that I can take? Now, what easy objectives are pretty much tier 1 towers. I consider these very easy objectives. Later on in the game, you might be thinking about taking Rosh, and obviously later on in the game, tier 2 towers become objectives as well. So you always want to be asking yourself if there's any easy objectives, and in this scenario, there is. I can take this bottom tower, or I can TP mid and take this mid tower. So in this case, I decided to just immediately push the bottom tower. As you can see, I stopped what I was doing, stopped farming, and started pushing bottom immediately. Most jungle Furion players I see, they're just gonna keep farming and just kind of ignore everything, and that's really not the right choice. Whenever your opponents are pushing for a gank or an objective, you really need to be trading, because that's gonna get the most for your team. One tower is gonna be worth a lot more to your team than 1 or 2 creep camps for yourself. So as you can see, I'm pushing here. I force the Tinker to TP, and he defends the tower. And that's actually a win for me. Anytime you force someone to TP and you get away, that's pretty much a win for you, because you just wasted some of their time. As you can see, I'm kind of not wasting my time. I'm just chilling in their jungle, farming up some additional creep camps. And I know this is safe because I just saw like 4 of them top a minute ago, so no one's going to be in their jungle. And here, I see more action is happening on top lane. We kill the Tinker, the Void TP's top and kills our Slark, and pretty much everyone TP's top again. And at this point, I see 3 of them top, and I know Tinker's dead. So I immediately, stop jungling and head for the bottom tower again. And this time, there's really no Tinker to stop me, and no one else can really TP to stop me either. So that's a free tower. And notice I actually managed to get my tower way faster than they even started pushing the top tower. So it's definitely very good and a very easy objective trade. And this is the kind of thing that you really always need to be doing as Jungle Prophet. Now in this example, I didn't even have to teleport because I was already in position. But say you were jungling somewhere over here, or just somewhere that's not already in position. You should immediately be teleporting into bottom lane or middle lane and pushing the tower. You should never keep farming when there's easy objectives to be taken. So that's my second main point, that most jungle prophets I see, they really fall into the farm and do nothing category. Whereas if you want to play this game at a very high level, if you want to be able to carry your team, you're going to need to take every objective possible whenever there's an opportunity. Okay. So those were my 2 points, and in the next part of this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about the item progression and really what I like to get on Nature's Prophet in solo and party queue games in order to really be able to carry the game and, just raise that MMR. Alright, so see you in the next section. Hey guys, in this part of the tutorial, I'm going to be talking about what items you should be getting on Nature's Prophet Jungle, and what items I like to build. So as you can see here, this is the exact same game I showed you in the previous section, and I just picked up a Maelstrom. And this is actually my favorite build on Jungle Prophet, and it's actually my favorite build on a number of ranged heroes. So what it is Midas into Maelstrom, and pretty much this is the build that I go more or less every game, just because it has incredible farming power and it pretty much beats every other build out in terms of farming potential. It also lets you farm really fast without having to spam your ult every time it's on cooldown, which, by the way, you should never be spamming your ult just to farm. Always save it for team fights or ganks, or trying to stop enemy pushes or whatever. So in terms of my build, the reason I really like this build is because it lets you rotate through the jungle extremely quickly. With the Midas Maelstrom build, you can pretty much rotate through all 5 jungle camps in approximately a minute. is going to be a bit slower or faster depending on what level you are and what other items you have. But once you get those 2 items, you can pretty much clear the entire jungle every minute, and that just makes your farm accelerate to insane levels. If you have this build and you're not ganked, you're pretty much going to become the top net worth no matter what. So basically, I'm just going to kind of show you guys the impact of my build. Keep an eye on the net worth chart here on the top left corner. So you can see right now I'm about 600 gold ahead of the Void. And I'm going to start fast forwarding through the game so you guys can see what happens. Okay. So last time I was 600 gold above the Void, and I fast forwarded about 3 minutes later, and you can see my Midas Maelstrom build is starting to kick in. This time I'm 1100 gold ahead of the Void. So I've gained a little bit of ground, but still he's keeping up. He also has a Maelstrom, and his build is pretty good for farming as well. So, not to mention he has 2 kills and no deaths. Alright, so moving on forward into the game. So this is about 3 minutes after the last time the last section there. And as you can see, I'm slowly pulling ahead of him. Now instead of 1200 gold, it's 1400 gold. And I'm just going to fast forward again. This is 3 minutes again, 3 minutes into the future, and here you can see the discrepancy is really starting to show. So instead of like 1400 gold, now I'm 3000 gold ahead of him. And this is partially because he died once, but this is still a 4-1 Void. He should be pretty farmed. And keep in mind this has been a very kill intensive game with lots of reactionary movement. So his CS number is very, very low for, I guess, what it potentially could be. But that's how games go. Most carries can't hit 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 CS a minute just because the games don't go that way. So I think I've made my point here. You can pretty much see, as long as you have the Midas into Maelstrom build, you're pretty much going to be on top of the net worth chart, and it's going to kind of constantly grow as the game goes on. One thing to keep in mind is that if you do go for Midas into Maelstrom, you're actually really, really squishy. So I would advise you get treads kind of for that extra bit of HP, and the attack speed also synergizes really well with the Maelstrom. And you also should be watching where you TP, because when you only have Midas into Maelstrom, you're extremely squishy, and if you TP into somewhere where you can die easily, most likely you will die easily. So it really forces you to be careful about where you TP. It really forces you to, think carefully and only choose to TP into good spots and into good situations. But that's something that you should be doing anyways. You should never be TPing into a bad situation. So this is actually gonna, in the long term, probably help you with your positioning as far as TP goes. Now, the last thing I wanted to kind of talk about is what other items you should be getting on Profit. So if you're not sold on my Midas Maelstrom build, which I believe is the #1 build, by the way, you can also go into some other variations. You can go into Midas Shadowblade, which I see a lot of players doing. That build also has its benefits. It does help with ganks because you can go invisible and they won't know you're coming. It makes you really, really slippery, so you can kind of rat towers, and it's really, really hard to kill you. And just overall, pub players have a hard time dealing with Shadowblade, so that's also a good choice. A third choice that I see is Necrobook, which is primarily meant for pushing down towers and whatnot, and that's also an acceptable choice if you get it early on. You can also occasionally rush an Orchid if your opponent has heroes that get screwed over by an Orchid. For example, if they have like a Queen of Pain or a Storm or Anti-Mage or anything that just gets screwed over by the silence. So after you get your Midas and your next big item, what I generally like to get is Sheepstick. And that's just because Sheepstick, when combined with Teleport, is absolutely insane. It's a global hex, and that's just completely insane in terms of ganking, in terms of team fights, in terms of everything. So you should always aim to have a Scythe of Life in your build at least, somewhere in your 6 item slot. You don't have to get it third, but you should definitely be having it in your item slot eventually. So that's pretty much it. The only other thing I would say is I really like to get more of a right-click type of Furion, and what I generally end up getting is, for example, in this game, as you can see, I end up getting, or maybe it's a bit later on, I end up getting like a MKB in addition. And this is something you can also do on Furion. You can get like a Daedalus or even like Desolator, and you can make your last slot a BKB, and that effectively turns you into a hard carry. I really like doing that in pub games just because I generally farm so much faster than everyone else on the team does. And it basically gives your team another hard carry, which is good because you can't always rely on one hard carry if it's a pub, just because most people aren't reliable and sometimes they'll feed, sometimes they won't do well. So it's really going to be up to you to carry the game. That's why I like this build, and hopefully you guys will try this build out on your own and see how well it works. It's gonna accelerate your farm a lot, and as long as you can keep yourself alive, you're gonna become a beast late game. So that's about it for this time. If you like this video, please feel free to subscribe or like the video. And next time I think I'm gonna be starting to branch out into the lanes. So I might be bringing you guys a guide on how to farm efficiently as a safe lane carry. And I might also be bringing out some tips and tricks on, just generals about going mid and what you need to do there, and also off lane and support. So I'm going to be branching out into the lanes in future videos. Make sure you follow for those, and I'll see you guys next time. Thanks.